Everyone, welcome back to Memoirs of a Gamer. My name is Nick, and today I am pushing myself to the limit. Like, I'm learning new skills trying to do this channel. I'm learning how to edit, I'm learning how to talk on the mic, I'm learning sound, I'm literally learning everything from scratch.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
So I thought I'd up my game a bit and try and do a list of games that I believe changed the world forever. So sit back and relax and enjoy my list. The top 10 games that I believe changed gaming forever in the mid-90s. First game, Command & Conquer. So Command & Conquer wasn't the first real-time battle strategy game. That award goes to Hosting 2, which was on the Mega Drive. I didn't know this game existed until I started researching this. My friend has played it. He said it's really, really good. But Command & Conquer was certainly the one that caught the public's imagination, and everybody in the mid-90s was playing this game. Developed by Westwood Studios and released in 1995, Command & Conquer opened up real-time strategy battle games to a whole new audience when it landed on PlayStation. Real-time strategy games were usually on PC due to their complexity and the size of, so they had a smaller niche and a smaller following due to the PC being extremely expensive in the mid-90s. Only rich people could afford a PC in the early 90s to mid-90s. So PC gamers were pretty niche. This is where they get the whole master race from. So when the game came to PlayStation, it was a big deal. People had never seen anything like it before, and most kids were excited for it because who doesn't want to play real-time war games? The plot of the game is set sometime in the near future. Earth has become contaminated by a mysterious substance called Tiberium. As with anything in human history, a war ensues between the UN-formed Global Defense Initiative to contain the Tiberium and the cult quasi-state Revolutionary Brotherhood of Nod.
Jalapeno prickly pear pepper butter.
No, the Revolutionary Brotherhood of Nod. Who comes up with this shit? Led by the enigmatic Kane, who seeks to harness the material. The gameplay is typical battle strategy game. The players have to construct a base. Once they've constructed the base, they send out their machines to try and mine for ores and minerals and stuff, and then that comes back and you transfer that into the machines. That becomes money and currency, and then you buy more ships and more soldiers, and you upgrade, and then as you're doing this, you're battling the other side, and then you go and invade and try and blow up each other's bases. So the game had real life cutscenes with really, really bad mid-90s FMV actors.
Gradenko. How long did it take the gas to work?
Is it safe to speak?
Of course. Go on.
The kill time depends upon the weight of the subject.
Oh my god, like some of these Russian accents are terrible. Almost as bad as mine. Yet my personal memory from playing this game is Tanya. You send in a woman called Tanya, and she's got like a machine gun, and she talks like this. It's just so random, but she can take loads of damage, and she literally goes in and just kicks everyone's ass. All hail Tanya. So Command & Conquer sold 3 million copies, which doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time, gaming wasn't like it was now. It was more niche still. It really was. It wasn't as like, now it's like this global phenomenon that earns more than Hollywood every year. Back then it wasn't. It was basically like a toy. Selling 3 million copies was pretty impressive. But as of 2009, the franchise has sold 30 million, so it's not too shabby. The game spawned many sequels, and it's still going today, and obviously these kind of games can be carried around on your phone, so they're a lot more accessible to everyone rather than when they were actually stuck on PC. Next up, number 9, GoldenEye. Back in the 90s, first-person shooters were pretty much not accessible to everyone, not decent ones anyway, because of the technical limitations and cost. First-person shooters sat comfortably on the PC. There were a few attempts to bring them across onto the SNES and the Mega Drive, which had questionable results. They brought across Wolfenstein 3D and also Duke Nukem 3D, but one of the first first-person shooters was on the Mega Drive. Again, the Mega Drive doing it first, and this was called Bloodshot. So I didn't know this game existed until I started researching this either. It's amazing how many firsts were on the Mega Drive that we just don't even realise. But the games, when they were on the consoles, they just didn't slap the same. Because of the controls, for one, using a PC to play in a 3D environment, you could use the keys and the mouse, which gave you more motion control, just like you have nowadays with the double analog stick. I'm old enough to remember when it was just the D-pad, I'm afraid. And that's what these games suffered from, trying to walk around it in a 3D environment using a D-pad, just one D-pad, I've gone and played some old games again recently, and I just don't know how did we play games? How did we do it? Because it was like the most complicated thing in the world. PlayStation made a few attempts as well to release some first-person shooters, and they were alright. They had varied results, but the ones that stand out to me are like Alien Trilogy. Alien Trilogy was a good game, but the graphics were still a bit, and it was still single player. But what made these first-person games so popular on PC was the fact that they had multiplayer and they were online gaming, and it was absolutely revolutionary at the time because it had never been seen before. You could actually play games with people down the road or in different countries, never been seen before. Now we take it for granted. But did you know that the first online gaming attempt was actually done by the Mega Drive in 1984 in Japan? Sega set up 2 consoles. One of them was in the Ginza shopping district. I probably butchered that, so I do apologise if anyone Japanese watching. And they wired it up so that fans could play with other gamers 4 kilometers away in the hobby store. It was the first time that consoles had ever played online together, but it was on the Sega modem and it just never took off. I think they were too ahead of the time, because back then most people didn't even have an internet connection. I know I didn't get my first internet connection until 2001, so it's just crazy. So like, have this technology in 1989, there was no point because nobody had any way of using it. I think Sega really did predict the future there.
Bring special luck for Leo and Aries and friends who play football together.
But the world just wasn't ready for it because we weren't kitted up for it. PCs and internet cables were pretty much office equipment at the time. Back in the 90s, consoles were generally 2-player, or if you wanted to play a 4-player, you needed a special adapter to plug into, like, say, your PlayStation port, and they were pretty expensive as well, really, for what they were. So I don't ever know anyone who ever owned one. So let's get back to the point of this. GoldenEye. So when Nintendo brought out the Nintendo 64 and GoldenEye, the console had 4 ports on the front already, so you were ready to go. All you needed was 4 controllers. And if you had a couple of friends who had a Nintendo 64 as well, you just got them to bring the controller around. I spent many a night with my friends, all sat around the telly with 4 controllers playing GoldenEye to death, and Mario Kart, but GoldenEye. It was the first time that a whole generation of teenagers could sit in a room together and play a 4-player, and the game was made for the 4-player as well. The multiplayer on it, chef's kiss. It was just perfect. It was the first time we had 4 players that literally had all these different types of modes that would keep us playing it for years to come, and I still know people who play it to this day, and people swear by it. But the reason that GoldenEye is on this list is because it brought the first-person shooter multiplayer genre to a whole new audience, and if it wasn't for that game, I don't think we would have the audience we have now for games like COD and stuff like that, because everything starts with a tiny seed. So that's why GoldenEye sits nice and comfortably on this list at number 9. Number 8, PaRappa the Rapper. So in 1996, rhythm games just didn't exist. But then PaRappa the Rapper came out and it literally took the world by storm. Every PlayStation owner had played PaRappa the Rapper at some point. The graphics were instantly recognisable. The character was cool and dressed in 90s streetwear. And the whole aesthetic of it was just different. I mean, who doesn't want to dance with an onion? Too many mushrooms. So the game was designed by, I'm going to butcher this, Matsuya Nutsuru. I think I got that right. I do apologise if I didn't. And he was a musician. He hated appearing in his own music videos, so what he ended up doing, he started creating interactive software to promote himself, and he was approached by Sony to help work on a game. So he was helping them make a game, and he decided to focus on making a musical game. He toyed around with ideas like singing or playing the guitar, like Guitar Hero. This guy was ahead of the time, but he just wanted to do something different. So Matsura was interested in sampling music and people's voices, because he wanted actual voices on the game. So the idea literally evolved into a rap game. So originally, PaRappa was a shrimp, because it's Japanese and, you know, why not? The game came into some problems though, because they didn't know how to market the game, because there'd never been anything like it before. How do you market something that's never existed before? Like, everything's got established marketing now, you know what worked. Because this was a rhythm game, how do you advertise that to people? Some people even argued it didn't qualify as a game, but the game was absolutely massive and so successful in Japan. They decided to do a North America release where it wasn't as successful. As of today, the game sold 1.6 million copies. Not huge, like I say, by today's standard, but it's still impressive for a game that tried to do something first straight out of the gate and it had never been done before. But this game is definitely on the list of cultural relevance, because if it wasn't for this game, there would be no Rock Band, there'd be no Guitar Hero or any other kind of rhythm games that you can think of. This game literally started it all off. Got a fun fact for you as well. Did you know that PaRappa closely translates in Japanese to paper thin? So that's why PaRappa the Rapper was a paper thin cut out of a dog. So there you go. Next up, number 7, Discworld. So Discworld is a game that is based on the Terry Pratchett book series that has sold sold over 100 million copies worldwide. So the game is a point-and-click adventure. Again, a staple on PC only at the time. They were massive in the 80s and 90s. It basically took the Dungeon and Dragon tabletop crowd and it gave them something digital to play. The genre appeared around 1984 with a game called Enchanted Sculptors. These were like 2D games, literally just pictures. And they had no dialogue or anything like that. And they had a story and a narrative, and you had to click to what you wanted to do. So like you'd click move east, move west, and you'd move around this piece of 2D paper to like different rooms and stuff. It's just crazy how far we've come. But they were revolutionary because everything you did had consequence. Never been done before. Even though it was done in the most basic of forms, it literally changed the world. But with the adoption of CD-ROMs in the early 90s, it made it possible to offer higher graphics and higher sound quality, even digital video, which gave way for like voice acting and cutscenes and stuff. Now, before Discworld, there was a couple of point and clicks knocking around that didn't really take off. Probably because one of them was on the Mega CD, and the Mega CD just did not sell well at all. There was also one on the Famicom, but obviously you can imagine the limitations of these consoles. They just weren't good enough for what needed to be done for it to become as successful as they were. Enter the PlayStation. So the PlayStation allowed Discworld to come to a whole new audience. This game had cartoon graphics, it had full voice dialogue. For the time, it looked stunning. It was literally like playing an immersive game. You was part of the story, and they added humour.
I'll see you later.
How much later?
Don't start reading any long books.
They had character, they had personality, and it was British made, so obviously it was absolutely amazing because we just make all the best stories. Well, we used to. We don't anymore if it's shit now. British things used to have like a feel to them, so they kind of had this quaintness to them, like the old Harry Potter films. So Discworld had that quaintness that British culture used to have in the 90s. So Discworld's reviews, they vary. Some people say it's really slow paced, it's just not very good. Discworld was the one that led the way for others. So a more popular one, I would say, were the Broken Sword series. More people probably played Broken Sword because Broken Sword took what Discworld did and made it slightly better, more faster paced, more exciting, I'd say. Discworld was fun, but yeah, it was a lot of dialogue. It was like watching a story that you can control, whereas Broken Sword, you felt like you were more part of the story, if that makes sense. That's why Discworld is number 7 on this list. Number 6, Gran Turismo. Racing games weren't a new concept. They've been around since the 70s. All major consoles, PC, everyone's got a staple racing game on it, going back to the arcade. The PlayStation had its arcade ports of Ridge Racer and stuff like that, but the arcade races, they were really limited on content. You just went around your track, and so once you won your races, that was it. It was game over, or you could do the mirror tracks, but that was it. So the games had limited replayability. They were good for what they were, especially like if you were playing, say, Outrun, the arcade mode. Outrun is still rock hard to this day. So that was like timed races to try and get as far as you could without the time running out. But when Gran Turismo came out, we'd never seen anything like it before. It wasn't a racing game, it was a racing simulator, and it really, really showed. It was, the graphics at the time looked so realistic. I know this must seem mad to people who are younger than, I don't know, 30, but the graphics at the time, you'd never seen anything like it. When you were watching the replays, the cars looked like real cars. Well, they were based on real cars, but they looked so good on the old tellies. Like the new tellies, they really do ruin resolution, but if you look at the old games on the old tellies, they still hold up to this day. So not just with the realistic graphics, but Gran Turismo also had real branded cars, and each car handled totally differently. So there are over 140 cars to choose from, which must have been an absolute logistical nightmare for the team making the game, because trying to get all those licenses must have took ages. And you could even kit out your cars and make them unique and do engine tuning and wheel trim tuning and all sorts. So it was fully customizable, which had never been seen before. It was literally a Grease Monkey's wet dream. Honestly, the game was just unbelievable. So it was just so cool. It was just like, I want a BMW. Got it, there's your BMW. Get your BMW. I want it red. Okay, we'll paint it red. And they even had the driving license, which was absolutely solid, to trying to get all your license rankings. It took months because you had to be so precise, and it handled like real cars. So yeah, for me, Gran Turismo changed gaming in the middle of the 90s. It changed gaming forever because there'd never been anything like it before. The game actually took 5 years to make, which is insane. When you think to old games, they never used to take that long at all. And Gran Turismo sold 10 million copies, which is just insane. The game programmer who created it, he actually turned around and said, and I quote, "It took 5 years to make. In these 5 years, we could not see the end. I would wake up at work and go to sleep at work. It was getting cold, so I knew it must be winter. I estimate I was only home for 4 days a year."
Wow.
Number 5, Tomb Raider. So if you weren't there in the mid-90s, you'll never know, but 1996 was It was so good. Ugh. If I could go back to 1996, I would go back to 1996. I just absolutely, I loved 1996. There was so much happening in 1996. So female representation in the games wasn't like it is today, or in film or anything. It was there. You know what I mean? You had your superheroes and stuff. In 1996, there was this shift culturally. So you had the Spice Girls who came out with girl power, and there was this whole like micro feminist revolution for young girls. Like the Spice Girls literally took over the planet for 2 years. They were everywhere, and it was all about girl power, female empowerment, empowering young girls. And in the middle of this massive cultural storm, at the perfect time, Tomb Raider came out, and you had this female antagonist who was gorgeous, powerful, rich. Lara Croft changed culture forever, and she became a sex symbol. Believe it or not, when you see the pictures of the old Lara Croft, it's like CGI mutant. But she became a pin-up, and she was literally on the front of magazine covers. She was in advertisement campaigns. Sex sells, and she was literally peak of sex in 1996. She was everywhere, honestly. It was crazy. And like I say, if you weren't alive then, you won't know what it was like. It was just mental. Anything went in 1996. The thing is with Lara Croft, women wanted to be her because she was like, culture's so different now, and I'm sure that people will go, oh, she's sexy, she's that, she's whatever. But back then, women wanted to be her, people used to dress up like her, men wanted to sleep with her even though she wasn't real. It's just the way it was. It was just the culture at the time. So Lara became this global sex symbol. It was also proof that women could be beautiful and strong. They didn't have to be one or the other. And like, they even kept her feminine, because if you get an action superstar who's female, they tend to make her more masculine looking and cut the hair short of him, but they didn't do that with Lara. They kept her 100% feminine. She was even like a gymnast, jumping around, even with a controversial square tits. Oh no, even with a controversial cone tits.
Weird.
She was still a sex symbol. She was basically like the female Indiana Jones. She literally led the way for a proper female action hero in a video game. And the games still hold up to this day. They've just released the remastered, and people still love them. People have gone mad for them because, like lightning in a bottle, like Lara Croft came at the right time, and she's still iconic to this day. Everyone still loves the original Lara Croft. So Tomb Raider went on to sell 95 million units, which is just absolutely mad. As of 2002, Lara had been around for 6 years, and her franchise was worth a massive 1.2 billion, which is just insane. For a new character straight out the gate, insane. And out of all that money, they used it to get her some lovely, nice round boobs.
Nice.
So she's not walking around with her polygon tits anymore. So that's why Lara Croft is number 5 on this list. Number 4. Pokemon Green and Red. So the Game Boy literally changed the way we play games forever. It showed the competition that you don't need the best graphics or the best light up screen or anything like that to be a success. The Game Boy was monochrome with battery pack and no backlight, and it still managed to sell 118 million units, which is just insane. Game Boy wasn't beaten until the PlayStation 2 came out, which sold 155 million, but the Game Boy is still up there in the top 5 selling consoles of all time. So when Pokemon came out, it was the second best selling game on the Game Boy ever. It sold 10 million copies, which is insane. Only to be beaten by, obviously, the legendary Tetris, which you're not going to beat Tetris. Tetris changed the world too, but that's not on this list because that was the 80s. This is the 90s. The game was so successful, it spawned the iconic cartoon, and it sealed the fact that Pokemon was going to be a future global brand going forward. In 2024, the brand is still going with a whopping 135 games. That's 25 main games, movies, and 8 cartoon series, which are still running to this day, 20 odd years later. So Pokemon gaming is worth around 30 billion, but they reckon that the merchandise alone is worth 100 billion, which is just, the numbers are just insane. So all this spawned from a simple game on a Game Boy, and that's why Pokemon is number 4 on this list. So number 3 on the list, Final Fantasy VII. Now I know Final Fantasy isn't the first RPG, and it wasn't a new concept. RPGs have been around for years, since the 80s, obviously, because there's like 7 Final Fantasies at this point, so obviously there was more before it. Final Fantasy VII is what caught the public's imagination, and I think it's because with 7, it had a cyberpunk feel to it, so it was a bit more edgy and dark, whereas the previous games that were in the franchise were more medieval style, so they were more fantasy. I know Chrono Trigger messed around with future and past and mixed it all together, but it wasn't really a big game. When 7 came to the PlayStation, it just changed the culture. Final Fantasy VII definitely introduced a whole new generation of teens into an RPG genre, which they would never have played before if it wasn't for this game. Cloud, Tifa and the gang instantly became fan favourites, and they're still recognisable to this day. It really did allow RPGs to become more mainstream in the West, because they were always always big in Japan, but they just didn't capture the imagination of the West until Final Fantasy VII came out. The game's themes are as well, they're really relevant today. It was kind of ahead of its time, really, talking about the whole climate thing and how we treat the planet. So the game is actually more relevant than ever. Even after all this time, nearly 30 years ago, the game has literally been ported so many times. You can even play it on your mobile phone these days because people absolutely still love it to this day. I've got some friends who are both massive fans of the original and they refuse to play the remake because they don't want to, because they say it'll tarnish it for them. I played the remake. I didn't really play this game at the time. I played it years later, so I don't have the emotional connection to it that they have. I can see what they mean, but I think they did a really good job with number 7 remake. So Final Fantasy VII went on to sell 10 million units. That's why Final Fantasy VII is number 3 on this list. Number 2, Resident Evil. Resident Evil. Sounded like that guy off Inspector Gadget.
Next time, Gadget, I promise I'll get you.
Arguably the most famous game on this list, and definitely the most famous horror game of all time. This game literally changed gaming forever, and I can talk about this from the heart because I absolutely love Resident Evil so much, especially the original ones. It just came out and changed the landscape forever. We'd never had a proper horror game that you could play. There was Sweet Home that came out before that on the NES, and Resident Evil is heavily influenced by Sweet Home, but it wasn't released in the West, so not many people know about it. For the first time, we actually got to control horror rather than just watch it on a screen. So being part of the horror experience was horrendous. It was proper terrifying, and the way the game was made as well, because you had to load between each room. They used the doors as the load screen, so you couldn't see what was beyond the door, so you actually had 5 seconds of anticipation of what they're gonna be behind this door, which really added to the tension. The game was just perfect, and for the time, what they achieved, it was just absolutely revolutionary. So at the time, horror wasn't as big as it is today. Like, you had your Friday the 13th and your Nightmare on Elm Street, and they were big, don't get me wrong, but horror was always a bit of a niche. You had a lot of really cheesy B-movie horrors about as well in the 80s. So what Resident Evil did, it took the B-movie acting and put it into a game, and it's just cheesy as hell. Honestly, it's so bad. The dialogue's horrendous, the acting's horrendous, it's just poor, but because it was done so bad, it's good.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
So people absolutely loved it. So from that humble game in 1996, it spawned a prequel, many sequels, several TV series, and 7 films. So it's become a multi-billion-dollar franchise just from this one little game. So the franchise so far has grossed $8 billion in 2023, and $6.7 billion of that came from just the game. So let that sink in. It's a lot of game. Resident Evil on PS1 sold 4 million copies. So that's why for me, Resident Evil is number 2 on this list. Number 1, drum roll. Super Mario 64! Yeah, I'll edit that out. Super Mario 64. So Mario cemented himself in gaming history in 1985. He came out and changed the way games were played forever. 2D graphics of Mario and the controls just made it so that anyone could just pick up and play and get their head around it, because it was so easy. You just ran and jumped, that was it. And because of this, Mario was successful. Now, Mario was so successful, when there was a shift in culture and all the consoles started to go 3D, people were like, oh, how are they going to make Mario go 3D? How would it work? Would it be able to happen? Would it be successful? All these questions, because we just weren't sure what was capable at the time. Mario was so iconic as well. If he failed to go into 3D, it would have been a really bad sign for everyone else and how they would evolve with the 3D gameplay. But when Mario 64 was shown at E3, they'd actually successfully brought Mario into the 3D realm. So Mario 64 gave you a non-linear world to run around in a 3D environment, and they'd adapted the controls, and for the first time ever you could actually control the camera using the C-sticks, as well as you had the analog stick, which made it so you could control Mario properly, and this had never been seen before. So it was revolutionary at the time as well. They worked so perfect that it was seamless, that Mario made this leap from 2D to 3D. The same can't be said for Sonic's. See, when Sonic came into the 3D realm, I still don't rate 3D Sonic games, even Sonic Adventure. I think Sonic's made to go fast that way, not that way. So for me, Mario did it better, and Mario still does it better to this day. So as usual, Mario set the bar, like Nintendo do very often, but people don't realize it. Nintendo do a lot of things first, but other people take their ideas and they make them better. But Nintendo usually are the pioneers with a lot of things. Mario 64 went on to sell 12 million copies. It created a whole new genre of 3D games, and even if you play Mario 64 today, it still plays amazingly. So Mario, we salute you. for being the best. He's always the best. And that's my top 10 list of games that I believe changed gaming in the mid-90s forever. Let me know in the comments what you think. What games do you think should be on the list? What games changed your life or your perspective of gaming? I'm just going off what I experienced at the time. So yeah, please like and subscribe. Please hit the bell and give me a follow. I really need the followers and I really appreciate it. And if you've got this far, thank you for watching the whole video and I will see you in the next one.